My name is David Rice with Weber Basin Water. I oversee the conservation programs. We've got Hattie Ann Fasselt with us. She's over our garden and education programs. And then today we've got Nick Loveland with IFA, and he's going to be instructing us. I'm going to turn the time over to him in just a second. Before I do that, a few little reminders of some of the stuff of how this webinar works. Of course, we want your engagement, we want your questions, but because you're all muted, you don't have an option to speak. Please look at your controls at the Q&A box, and you can just open that Q&A box. You can type a question, and then we'll answer those questions either ongoing, or we'll save those and then we'll pause. We'll interrupt Nick here occasionally and address questions as we go, or we'll save some of those to the end. But please just type your questions in that Q&A box, and we'll address those questions as we go. Just another brief little introduction to the district on water. I mean, we're a water provider, so our interest, of course, is in delivering water and maintaining water supply. Weber Basin manages the watersheds, I guess you could say, the basins for the Ogden and Weber rivers, and all of the reservoirs that are on those rivers are our water supply, and that carries us through both drinking water, agriculture, and of course, outdoor landscape water, which is secondary and drinking water, culinary treated water. So we do these classes to try to help you understand principles, good things that help you can maintain attractive landscapes while being water efficient. And so that's kind of the purpose of this. Interesting enough, some of you may tune in from other areas, but locally, the governor just declared a severe drought case. So this year is going to be interesting. So we encourage you to think about your lawns. Of course, you don't have to let your lawns go, but you don't need to water them every day. And Nick's going to teach you a lot of really good basic practices about lawns, how to keep lawns attractive and healthy while considering the water use on those lawns. So with that, Nick, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you. You can give a little brief introduction of yourself, and we'll just take it away from there.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, am I coming through okay?
Yep. All
right, excellent. Well, my name is Nick Loveland. I am a little rural town Idaho farm boy. Grew up in Cambridge, Idaho. If anybody knows where that is, it's really close to Hell's Canyon. Worked on farms, worked on ranches, went to school in Rexburg at Brigham Young University, Idaho. I managed in landscape design, or a bachelor's in horticulture with emphasis in landscape design. And then I got a job in Logan at Anderson Seed and Garden. Mark Anderson there was one of my great mentors and taught me a lot about lawns, taught me a lot about gardening, taught me a lot about all kinds of stuff. And then I had the opportunity to come to IFA, and it has been great. And I've been here at the IFA store in Ogden for about 8 years. I'm the assistant manager over the cool side of the store, the green side of the store. So we take care of the nursery and all the fertilizer stuff and clothing department stuff. So that's kind of my background. Me and my wife are avid gardeners. We have our garden. It's not ginormous, but it's about 12,000 square feet. And then we have a small little lawn, and that is gorgeous. So I, know what I'm talking about. And then we have 4 little boys that we work as slaves, and they love it, and we have a good time. So, so today we're going to talk about attractive, healthy lawns. One thing about gardening, and another thing I'm involved in, beekeeping and taking care of a lawn and everything. If you bring 4 people into a room that all know how to take care of lawns, you're going to get 5 to 6 different opinions on how to do stuff correctly. So a lot of these things is the way that I like to do them, which is good, and they work. But there are other people that will say, you know what, Nick's a joker. He doesn't know what he's talking about. You should do it like this. So there are a lot of opinions, but the basic principles that I will be talking about are pretty basic and known by all. But there's a few people like to do things just a little bit differently. So to start out with healthy, attractive lawns, we started our base. And what the lawn grows in. So I like to talk about soil type a little bit. There's 3 different particles in the soil, mainly, is sand, silt, and clay. And then organic matter is any, old grass clippings or dead roots or stuff like that. So sand, silt, and clay. The sand is the biggest particle. The silt is a little bit smaller, and then clay is very, very small, has a lot of surface area. We know that sandy soil doesn't hold water at all. Beautiful, pristine beaches. And silt kind of sort of holds water, and clay, you can never get the water to drain out of. So you can go from a crusty clay, and another reason to tell how you have clay soil and stuff as well is when it dries out, it usually makes big cracks in it. So it holds so much water, and then as it shrinks, you see it cracking. So like in your garden, or if you're building a new home and, after the rain today, you say, oh, the soil all dried out, just cracked and terrible. You need to amend that soil. You need to get it so it can breathe, so the grass roots can grow in there better, so that water and fertilizer can filter through those pores in the soil a lot better than just being a clay bowl that's just totally stuck together. So to get on one of my first soapboxes, people who may be putting in a new lawn. So there's a lot of new construction going in Utah. So if some of you are putting in a new lawn, just a few things that I like to talk about as far as soil goes and soil types. So it wouldn't be a bad thing to test your soil type. If you kind of want to do a test for yourself, you can take a handful of soil and put some water on it and squeeze it and hold it a little bit. And if it kind of feels like you could make a clay pot out of it, watch out. But if it, falls apart like sand on the beach, also a little bit of a problem. You want a good mix. You want a sandy loam soil, which is a little bit of sand, a little bit of loam, a decent amount of clay. But it should just make a nice ball that's pretty movable and pliable and comes right apart again when you play with it. And then you'll know that you've got a decent soil to work with. So in new construction, my aunt is building a new house way up in Troy, Idaho, and it's kind of on a hill. And she was like, okay, so they have a little skid steer, and they scraped away their topsoil. And then they had to haul in a bunch of soil to help build their house up on the hill. And she's like, and when we were hauling in, we buried all of our topsoil. She's like, so what should we do? Because fill dirt is terrible. There's an O layer and then an A. And anyway, so it came from the bottom of the pile, and there was no organic matter in it, no nutrient, a lot of clay. And she's like, so what can I do to that soil to make it better? And I was like, dig up your topsoil and go find it, because it's way better. And she's like, well, really, come on, what can I do? And I was like, go get your topsoil or haul in more topsoil, because it does make that much of a difference. So as you're building a new home, or if you're ready to build a new home, or you're going to sometime in the future, scrape that topsoil out of the way and keep it, because it is gold. It's worth a ton. And especially for the future of your plants and grass and stuff. So save the topsoil. If you have good topsoil, I recommend putting some compost in there. Soil pep, Oakdale's chicken compost. We have a lot here at the store. Anything that you can put in there to help put organic matter in there just helps open it up. Leaves places for air, water, and fertilizer to hang out amongst the roots. And then another thing I'd really like to do is I really like conditioning the soil. We have a product called Bountiful Earth Humate. I don't really have a picture of the bag, but a humate type product. Has a lot of humic acid in it. It's fossilized organic matter. Our product that we have in the store is mined down in southern Utah. And it's a Utah product, just an old vein of old plant material, an old lake bottom, I think is what they say it is, but just old good plant material that's been festering for years, and it's just chock full of great things for the soil to condition it. So that is a little bit about soil types. Does anybody have any questions about soil types? I'm going to switch to the Q&A thing here. Don't have any questions. Please ask questions. I would love to have questions. Then we know where to steer the conversation, so that we don't have to go and talk about something that you don't want to talk about. Okay, so if there's no questions about soil types, we'll keep going. Turf varieties. So once you have your decent soil, you need to decide what kind of grass you want to plant. The other day, I had a request for some buffalo grass, and whoever is planting it in an interesting area where they're not going to maintain it a ton, and it's going to be dry and gross, and it doesn't take very much water. But buffalo grass is horrid because it greens up in May, and then it dies in the first frost in September, and then it's dead the rest of the year. And I don't know why they want buffalo grass, but they really wanted it, so I got it for them. As far as normal kinds of grass, there are bluegrasses, perennial ryegrasses, annual, well, you don't need annual ryegrass, it's like a mulch, but fescues, and other things like that. So bluegrasses are traditionally the ones that take the most water. So as Dave's talking about how, it's going to be a drought year, Kentucky bluegrasses will fare the worst this year if you're trying to skimp on water. And sad thing is that most people have Kentucky bluegrass in their lawn, or at least a blend of it. Most grass seed that you can find is 85% bluegrass and about 15% perennial ryegrass. They mix those grasses together because the perennial ryegrass is a little bit more drought tolerant and does a little bit better in the heat, as far as not needing as much water and still looking green. But the Kentucky bluegrass will fade. I mean, it will outdo the perennial ryegrass in the spring and in the fall. And so the perennial ryegrass just kind of helps the lawn hold its own during the heat of the year. And perennial ryegrass, like I said, is more water efficient. Fescues are more water efficient. The only downside to perennial ryes and fescues is they're just not quite as soft. And other people will argue that they are, and they're just as wonderful as Kentucky bluegrass. But they say that they're not quite as soft. And a pro to them is they're a little bit better in high traffic. So if you have a herd of 4 rambunctious boys like I do, we need the toughest grass that we can get, because there's trails all through their lawn and their dog follows them around, and the grass takes a toll. You also want to think about shade. Usually people that have shade problems are in old established homes. Like my home is older and established, but for some reason they didn't plant very many trees. So there's not a ton of shade. So I don't have any major problems, but the grass has to have sun to make food. And if it can't make food, then it dies. And there's a lot of people just this spring already that I've had coming in. They're like, hey, I need some new grass seed. I was like, okay, is it shady there? And they look at me and they're like, yeah, why? That's why it's dead, because it wasn't able to make enough food. It wasn't able to photosynthesize in the sun and make its own food. And then we talked about high traffic already. High traffic grass, the fescues and the perennial ryes, they can take a beating. Those are the ones that you'd find more on sports fields. That your kids' soccer fields and stuff like that are probably more perennial ryegrass, although I think there is a bunch of Kentucky blue as well. But that's how cities and municipalities can make grass fields a little bit more affordable, because they don't quite have to put as much water on them, and they can take a little bit more of a beating and look nice even after a good game. Just basically make sure you know what you want. There are other varieties of grasses that don't really grow. That's called a slow mow or a no mow type of grass seed. And they can be anywhere from $8 to $15 a pound, $30 a pound for a grass seed that grows and looks green, but basically stays like AstroTurf. And you have to mow it like every 2 or 3 weeks. And it'll look a little scraggly at the end, but you just really don't have to take care of it very well. I mean, as far as mowing is concerned, and it uses very little water. So selecting a good turf variety is also important. Are there any questions about grass seeds? Okay, I have from Taylor, I have various dead spots that I need to reseed. What steps to reseed? I'm novice. Would you suggest the humate? Excellent question. So this is a question that I have a lot in the store on how to reseed, and I actually forgot to put it in my notes. So I'm glad that you brought it up. So if I'm seeding a lawn from start, you want to make sure that the seed bed's properly prepared, that it's been kind of festered up and tilled. You don't want a hard piece of that clay, nasty, cracked soil like we talked about. You want organic matter worked into it. You want it there and fluffed up, leveled out, ready to go with your sprinklers installed if you're going to have a sprinkler system. And then especially in the dead spots like that, Taylor, festering those up a little bit, scratching into them and getting them roughed up a little bit so the seed has a bed to go down into. That is excellent. The grass seed, when you plant it, the general rule for planting seeds is you plant a seed twice as deep as it is wide. So a grass seed is this wide and you plant it this deep. So you're just barely putting it under the surface of the soil. Most of the time when you plant grass seed, you spread it all over the surface of the soil. and you either cover it lightly with peat moss or a little topper type product, or just lightly scratch it into the ground with a little leaf rake or something, and then just keep it watered and keep it moist. As far as patching and dead spots, you fester those up. Humate would be a great thing to do. Actually part of my front lawn, there was just too many humps and bumps and stuff in it. And so we made the call to spray it all with Kills All or Roundup last fall. And it is kind of ugly right now. And my wife has said that I was lucky that it was raining today, because I was going to come home and have to start working on that. But in that case, she spread a bunch of humate on it yesterday to help that humate get into the soil. And if we do have any clay soil and stuff, the humate really helps to spread that clay up and make it so the chemical bonds in it aren't so tight. And then put the seed in there. You can cover it, like I said, with peat moss or topper, and then lightly water it. One thing to think about, with a lot of customers have already had a little bit of a problem with this spring. If you're planning on putting any type of a step 1 fertilizer down, whether it's from our company or other people's, a lot of them have a pre-emergent in there to prevent weed seeds. One problem with that is that weed seeds, seeds are seeds, and the pre-emergent also prevents grass seeds. So some people were planning on doing that, but they had a problem with sorry, I'm watching the thing that's distracting me. Some people had a problem with the step 1 killing all their grass seed, and they were disappointed in how it worked out, but they put a pre-emergent down and it worked perfectly and kept all those grass seeds from growing. So hopefully that helps with how to do your dead spots. Just make sure that those dead spots, if they're caused by dog urine or potty breaks, that you need to amend that soil a little bit, or try to get the urine and residue out of that area before. And I do have another couple of products that we could talk about there if that is the problem. But if it's caused by shade, you need to either cut down a tree or try to use a shady type grass that in most cases will fill in the hole. Kristen asked, we prepped our soil, added humate and compost and planted in the fall. We seeded the grass, or it's not coming up great, but only got about a ½ inch tall before frost. And now it's not full, a ton of weeds, and we don't know how to treat the weeds because the grass isn't big enough for weed killers. You use the Green Star 5. Hey, that's an IFA product. There may be a few spots we need to reseed. Okay, so your lawn may have been a little fragile to the grass seed. The grass seed may have been a little fragile still because it was only a ½ inch tall. The disappointing thing about grass seed is when it comes up and you get that ½ inch, and you're like, woohoo, it's growing. And then it stays there, which seems like forever. It's just sitting there. Nothing's going on. Those seeds push that blade of grass up to photosynthesize to get some food, and it is growing everything underneath. It is pushing out roots like crazy. So although the grass is not growing, I promise it's growing underneath. So that is probably why it stalled out at a ½ inch to an inch in the fall, because it was trying to establish a root system. And so if it looks like it's coming up this year, most of it probably made it through, but some of it could have, taken a death to frost. And so I would recommend putting a little bit, feathering in a little bit more Green Star 5 seed to help get that going. I have Green Star 5 right here. This is Green Star 5. The 5 is because it is a mixture of 5 different types of Kentucky bluegrasses. And these bluegrasses have been bred, just hybridized a little bit to be a little bit more disease tolerant, a little bit more water efficient, and a little bit more beautiful, a little bit softer, a little bit darker green. They just took all the best things they could and just go for it. And hopefully that answers your question, Kristen, but I think that's a little bit more seed. And usually the best time to plant grass seed is in the fall because the ground is the warmest. But right now, if you wanted to plant grass seed, the best time to do it is right as the trees try to push out their buds and those leaves start to pop out of those buds. That's Mother Nature saying that it's go time. It's ready to go. So let's see, that from another attendee, we asked questions about aeration, and we're working down towards aeration right now. So that is actually my next bullet point. Perfect. Somebody stole my notes. So thatching and aerating. Aerating, usually I recommend aerating once every other year or so. There's been a big problem with aerating lately. in this area, we'll get down to this when we talk about diseases in a minute, but in this area, we have a disease that's kind of running rampant that is called necrotic ring spot. It is a soil-borne illness that is transferred in the dirt. So there's a lot of aerations that are happening, and a lot of companies and Boy Scout troops, all kinds of people do aerations, and they fiddle in the dirt in somebody's yard, fiddle in the dirt in the neighbor's yard, fiddle in the dirt in somebody's yard in Layton, and then they come back and they go everywhere. So the problem is all that fiddling in the dirt, it's just transmits diseases. It can cause problems. So necrotic ring spot, it leaves a big ring patch in your yard, and the grass is totally dead in the ring, but sometimes in the middle of the ring, there's grass, and on the outside of the ring, there's grass. And so aeration, I recommend it, is good, but if you do it, you need to make sure that the aerator has been washed out and sterilized. And I know that sterilized is a totally cliche word now, but it's just as important in your lawn as it is for your hands and when you're around people and wearing masks and stuff. The spores from that soil-borne illness, they can just infect your lawn, and then all of a sudden you've got a huge problem. The one big thing about it is for a lot of other fungus problems, there are pretty decent cures, but for necrotic ring spot, there's not a cure. There are a few things that mask it, a few things that help it, a few things, on how to keep, things sterilized so you don't get it, but there is no cure to it. It's kind of like the cancer of lawns. I mean, there's some things that you can do for it, but there's other things when it's going, it's going. And there are a few products that will help mask it and demand your grass to grow and kind of starve the spores, but they're still there. And if you change your practices, it can come right back instantly. So please be careful with your aerating. I have a product here at the store called Consan 20. If you rent an aerator, you can spray it. Once you get all the dirt and stuff out of the aerator and squirt it off really good, you can spray it down with this Consan 20 and let it sit there for 20 minutes. Consan 20 is used to sterilize like hospital surgery rooms and stuff like that. It's a really good product. And if you let it sit on there for a little while, you should feel fairly safe to go and do stuff like that, to do an aeration without being contaminated. And then thatching, old Larry Sagers, who used to be on the KSL radio show, it's Tom Bettis that's on there now, but Larry Sagers, he never really recommended thatching. A lot of times when you have, your grass, you mow it because it grows really, really good because you used IFA fertilizer. You build up thatch. And so the thatch just builds up and your grass keeps growing through. And then this just gets really thick. And sometimes it catches fertilizer and causes some problems, and the water doesn't get down as good and your soil's not breathing enough. So some people will rake it out. I would rather manage a thatch layer than take it all the way out, because I think thatch layers really help retain water, especially on a drought year. But when they're retaining water, as far as retaining water, it helps just the soil be covered so that it doesn't release a whole bunch of water. And then you can manage that by the use of humate, how we talked about earlier with humate. It's got a lot of active little bugs that eat down old grass clippings and keep those things down. And it will just kind of keep that thatch layer at a reasonable level. So there never really should be a reason to thatch. Because when you go through and thatch, it has these metal blades that are on this bar, and they just flip around it and just beat the holy 11th snot out of your yard and rip all that stuff up. And it's just, I don't like getting beat up, and your lawn really doesn't like it either. So I don't know if there's a ton of benefit to doing that regularly. I mean, if you inherit somebody's huge problem, they need to try to clean it up. I get it, and I understand the point of that. But doing it regularly, I don't think is necessary, because you can, with a decent fertilizer program and humate and the right amount of water, you can keep those under control. So if there's no more questions on that, we'll go down a little bit more and talk about diseases and insects. One of the biggest, there's quite a few insects that cause all kinds of problems, but I want to touch on the two biggest ones that we usually have problems with here in the area. Usually it's billbugs and just normal grubs. So billbugs overwinter as adults. And so sorry, I don't have a slideshow with a cool picture of this, but they'll overwinter and they'll be, 2 to 4 inches under the ground during the winter time. And then as it gets warmer, as they feel the sun warm up the soil, they'll work their way up, and they usually emerge about April. And so we're just within 10 days or so of them coming out and starting to lay eggs, cause problems. So the adults don't usually cause many problems to the lawn, but I like to suggest an insecticide right now, and to keep the bugs out of there so that we don't have any problems. So then if they can't lay eggs, then they can't, the eggs can't cause a problem to the lawn, because the problem comes when the bill bugs eggs hatch and start eating the grass, and that's when you have problems. It's not so much the adults, but it's the babies that cause most of the problems. So putting down an insecticide right now will help control the adults so there aren't as many eggs, and then no problems. Grubs also, grubs are a little bit later in the life cycle. So as they come up, they won't come up till May or June, the real grubs, and they'll come up a little bit later in the year, and they come up and out of the ground, but they kind of overwinter as this weird larva thing, and then kind of adultize as they turn into adults as they're coming out. And then they'll go lay eggs and cause problems, and their eggs will cause problems. And, you know, you find those big old fat white grubs underneath your soil. One way to tell that if you've got a bug problem, a lot of people say, my grass is dry, I need to water it more because it turns brown. But I like to do the pull test. Go grab it, grab a whole handful of it like you're grabbing a head full of hair. Don't do that though. And grab a handful of grass and just pull on it. If it comes up like you're not even thinking about it, if it comes up with very little effort, you've got something down there with little scissor teeth chopping all that grass off. And that is how you know it's a bug problem. And if you further examine after that, you'll see all the bugs in the soil. You find little white grubs. Sometimes the bill bugs are just like fingernail big. And other times some of those grubs, I mean, you'll be like, whoa, look at that big old thing. It can be huge. So, and the bigger they are, the more they can eat. There's multiple insecticides that you can do. I've got 5 here at the store. Preventative as well as, oh no, I have a huge problem, I need to kill these things now. I call that my 911 button one. It's in a black bag, and it was, as soon as you know you have a grub problem, you need to come grab some of that or get some of that somewhere and kill those babies really quick, because they'll continue to cause problems. And then you can overseed to fix that damage, or just fertilize a little bit more and make your lawn healthier so it will grow in and fill in those spots. When to apply insecticides and fungicides. Insecticides we talked about, usually for grubs and bill bugs. I like to apply, if you've had a problem, I like to apply in April, and I like to apply usually the first part of July, to keep a good steady wall of problems away from us by killing all those things that we can. And then fungicides, if you have a fungus problem, whether it be necrotic ring spot or some brown spot, a lot of times, sometimes you'll see a fungus problem. You can spot it you'll see your lawnmower tire, and you'll see it lying down your lawn. You're like, what in the heck is that? That tire rolled down through those spores and just kept spreading them along like a little flower girl at a wedding, just spreading the spores, and you just got a big old problem through your lawn. And so a normal, just basic lawn fungus will help take care of that. Sometimes people like to apply a lawn fungus and an insecticide together, kind of like, a bad mechanic that just, no, this will fix all of it. We'll just replace these 6 parts and it'll take care of the problem. The only thing that I don't like about that is that you don't know what the problem was. So you don't know if changing your maintenance practices, whether mowing longer or putting down a bug killer, or, you don't know what exactly the problem was. So you don't know how to fix it, because a bug problem and a fungus, there's dead grass. Bug problem, fungus, and dry lawn, they all look the same. So it's hard to say exactly what caused the problem if you do something that takes care of multiple things and you're like, well, I don't know exactly what it was, but we fixed it. So be careful of that. I'm just leery of that because I like to know what's going on and why it's going on. And if you have any questions or concerns, I'll leave my phone number with you at the end, and you can call me or text me or whatever, and I'm always happy to help. Let's see. One other thing I want to talk about is snow mold. Sometimes when your snow melts off your lawn, which we didn't have any this year, so you probably never had it this year. Sometimes when your snow melts off the lawn, and golf courses, they have a big problem with this because they use a lot of fertilizer. You'll see like pink splotches and stuff on the lawn. And that is usually from too high a nitrogen underneath the snow. And so it's called snow mold that just makes a fungus grow a little bit faster. but the same type of fungicide, we can get that taken care of and do good with that. Okay, diseases and insects. If there's any questions on those, please let me know. But dry grass, you're most likely to have a problem with diseases and insects. For some reason, they like grass that is stressed out. So if you have a problem, or lawn that is getting dry or that is over a bunch of rocks and it doesn't have good soil to root into, diseases and insects will fall in that place first. And that's just how it happens. Paulette asked in the fall, she said in the fall, her lawn gets rust. And what can you do for that? So those basic fertilizers that we talked about, Paulette, that we have that take care of dollar spot and brown spot and snow mold, that should also cover rust as well, to get rid of that. Rust usually looks like kind of a red tint, and some of the other funguses sometimes will look like kind of a gray tint to the lawn. But rust should do that. This fungicide should help get rid of the rust as well. And if you do need to do an application in the fall, it should be totally fine. And that should help take care of it a lot. But feel free to call me later if you want to follow up with that question. Bev asked about acorns ruining a lawn. They don't necessarily ruin a lawn. I have one lawn that I take care of on the side, that I fertilize on the side just for fun. And it's about an acre worth of grass, and the front yard does have a lot of acorns. And I know that walnuts, and I don't know this about acorns, so I'm sorry I don't know the exact answer to this, but I know that walnuts and walnut leaves have a lot of carcinogens in them, and they don't do good things for the soil. So walnut leaves, you never want to till them into your garden, and they'll cause problems. But I don't think the acorn leaves have that same thing. And sometimes if there's just a lot of acorns, you'll just have a lot of sprouts, you'll have a lot of problems. I know that there are a lot of people that live up on benches next to the shrub oak that have a lot of acorn problems, and I'm guessing that's where you might be, Bev. But I don't think the actual acorn, unless it has carcinogens in it like a walnut might, or the walnut leaves and husks might, I don't think that acorns will cause the problem. You might want to look at shaded spots, and or maybe just an abundance of acorns is just kind of matting out your grass and not giving it the opportunity to grow. But I'd look into that just a little bit further and see if I can look at acorns. If you have any further questions, contact me and we can look at acorns.
Hey Nick, could I just jump in for a second on that one?
Yeah, for sure.
A lot of times in these areas with scrub oak, if you live in the foothills and you have scrub oak, even mature ones, a lot of the issues I think with lawns in scrub oak areas, it's not so much the acorns, but it's the competition. It's the shade and then the competition of resources in those areas. It's the soil, the water, the nutrients. So if you have lawn problems in scrub oak areas, it's usually more just that competition and shade more than acorns or other factors. At least that's my experience with those.
Yeah, and I didn't even think about the competition. I think that's exactly right, Dave. I think those are large contributors for sure. And then Bev also asked, is there something you can do about animals scratching small holes in the lawn? So one thing, the biggest thing that I have found why animals scratch holes in the lawn is because they're either after bill bugs or grubs, or they're after worms. So Bev, if you have that problem, I'm guessing that your home is a little bit older and more established. Your soil is a little bit more healthy, and the worms really like to hang out in your area. You probably have some bumps and humps in your lawn because those worms, they push up and make a little wormhole, and then you can't barely walk through your lawn without breaking your ankle. So those animals are probably, birds do it too. Birds will go after grubs and stuff too. But my guess is that you probably have animals digging after worms because they're delicious. And the one way to help kind of get rid of the worms, which will help the wormholes as well, and the animals digging, is sometimes those animals the worms don't like sulfur. They don't like, I don't know if it's the change in acidity in the soil or if the sulfur smells funny to them, because sulfur, doesn't smell good. But if you take a sulfur product, we have one here that is called Tiger XP sulfur. But if you spread that sulfur down at about 50 pounds per 5,000 square feet or so, it kind of changes the soil a little bit, makes it more acidic, and the sulfur gets in there. And the worms, they don't really like that. And so they'll kind of go down deep and kind of get away from that area. And it's not a cure-all. It doesn't work perfectly every time, but I think it's a great hindrance to keeping them in the lawn and getting rid of those humps and bumps and the animals digging in your yard. Is there an order for lawn care? Aerate first, pre-emergent second. What do you suggest getting done during the early months, March, April, May? So if you are using a pre-emergent fertilizer, so for example, our IFA step 1 is right there. It has a pre-emergent in it, and it has lawn fertilizer in it. So that pre-emergent, it's a little, all the granules are coated in yellow. And when you put that thing down, it makes a blanket. So if you were to aerate after you put down a blanket, you're going to have lots of holes in your blanket. So what I would suggest is aerating first, and then putting down your fertilizer with your pre-emergent on there. And when you apply fertilizer, we're kind of working our way into fertilizer right now. So just to talk about how you apply any type of a step 1 fertilizer with pre-emergent, you need to put it on there, and you need to water it with a 1/2 inch of water. That 1/2 inch of water, which today is awesome. We sold so much fertilizer yesterday because everybody was like, it's going to rain. I need to put my step 1 down, because we don't have any secondary water yet, because Dave hasn't gone over there and turned it on. So we, when we put down that 1/2 inch of water, it washes off all that yellow stuff, that pre-emergent, off that granulated fertilizer, and dissolves the fertilizer too, and makes a little blanket. And it just covers the whole area of the ground as long as you spread it evenly. And then any weed seeds that try to come up through that blanket, they hit that layer and they're like, okay, I'm done. And it'll keep them from germinating for the most part. It does a pretty good job at controlling all of those things. And there are other pre-emergents that you can add a bunch of if you feel that you have a lot of weed pressure. A lot of weeds blow in. A lot of people, they can come through secondary water. But if you put a lot of decent pre-emergent, a lot of people have a problem right along, right along their driveway. So where they edge and stuff right there. So if you take some pre-emergent, I've got this stuff right here. This is a season-long pre-emergent, and it has an active ingredient in it called isoxaben, which is gallery. Gallery is one of the best pre-emergents on the market. It helps against dandelions and crabgrass and spurge and all that kind of stuff. And it does a really good job at preventing those things from coming up. So I would recommend aeration, then, a step 1 type fertilizer. And then if you have to thatch, you could do it in the spring, but it's good to do it in the fall. And then in April, May, you could do your insecticide. And so those are usually all the lawn starter things that I would recommend for right now. Lawn down the street is always very dark green and always mowed very short, 1 inch or less. Very dark green, even right now. Wondering if that's a different type of grass. I've always been told that the lawn should not be mowed short. True. The one thing, there are some people that have a golf course, right? They have a golf course. And if they fertilize it enough and mow it short enough, then there's no room for dead grass, and there's always green blades up, and they will have a good looking golf course. There's a possibility it could be a different type of grass. I know that perennial ryegrass is always a little bit darker. From my experience, even in my lawn where I have a little bit of perennial ryegrass, I know it's there. It seems to be darker and a little bit more rich in color. It's just not quite as soft as the Kentucky blue. But as far as mowing is down, you're skipping ahead a little bit, but if we're going to talk about it, we might as well. Mowing your lawn in the deep summertime when it's really hot, the longer your grass, the better. I know it looks a little bit shaggy, and it's not quite as clean cut. It doesn't look like that guy down the street. My father-in-law cuts his lawn like that. It's really short, it looks really good, and I could take my putter on it anytime I wanted to. But they do use a lot of water. They say that if you picture a plant above ground, there's usually that much or more roots underneath it. So, if your plant is only this big, the roots underneath it are not that big. And if it gets watered every single day, like you're not supposed to do, your roots are this deep. So you have a plant this big and roots this deep. And if you were to go on vacation and your sprinkler system broke, your whole lawn would be fried by the time you got back. But if you had a lawn that had, 3 inches of growth on it, and then good set of roots going down 6 inches because it had been watered intermittently, then you'd have one good healthy lawn. Even if your sprinkler system broke while you were gone, it would be a little bit drier, but it would be in good shape. So I don't recommend cutting your lawn short. I'm not sure the variety of grass that he has, but with this a steady fertilization and keeping it well cared for, but not necessarily mowing that short, maybe changing variety of grass, you could probably have the exact same thing. But you might have to ask him, you might have to go down there and ask why, what variety they might have, because it might be different. Okay, so no more questions from what I can tell. We're gonna talk about fertilization a little bit. So fertilization, and we're getting a little low on time. So, oh, I have some prairie grass on my lawn, house built in 2005. Is there anything I can do to get rid of it? So I assume that by prairie grass, you mean like a wider bladed grass that's kind of harder and kind of grows in bunches. That it could be a type of field grass, a type of fescue, a field fescue or something like that. The only thing that you can do to that is just spray it with Roundup. You have to spray it and kill it. A lot of people will try to dig it up, but you're never going to get every single root in the ground. It's like digging for glass. You're never going to find it all. So it would be best to spray it with Roundup outside of that area just a little bit. Spray it down with Roundup. Let the whole ugly patch die. Then you can dig that out of there if you want to, level it off and replant that area. If your whole lawn is infested with it, you could start over. That's another problem. We had a corner of our front yard where we tilled it all up. We had a problem with that too. So it was not tolerable. So we had to take it out of there. So that's what I suggest for big prairie grass like that though. An easy way to get rid of spurge. Spurge is an annual weed, and it can be, so it dies every fall. So with a good pre-emergent, Bev, you can take care of that. Especially that one that I showed you, you can spray on the edges, because spurge usually comes on the edges first. And this will really help take care of that. Just an extra layer of pre-emergent on that edge. And it, the first time you see it, if you see some popping up, you just need to spray it. There's great weed sprays. I don't have this one. I've got this one that's weed-free zone. It works really good in cool temperatures. You wouldn't use it as much on spurge, but it does a really good job in cool temperatures right now. If you have a few dandelions pop up or have something, some mallow or something from last year that overwintered, this will take care of it really well. But as far as later in the season, we'll just get one that's a little bit different temperature rating that can kill things during the summertime. And as soon as you see that spurge, touch it up a little bit and it'll stay gone. Spraying weeds is a very efficient way to get out of there. I don't use tons of chemicals, but chemicals have a purpose, and when used within regulation with the proper labeling, they're very safe. And I spray my lawn all the time, very little, just on the spots where I need it, and keep my boys safe and happy, and everything's okay. So, okay. So with fertilizing, it's like us. You can either eat a huge meal and be totally bloated and miserable, or you can eat a few little meals kind of frequently and be totally fine. Sorry. And then you can be totally starved and be famished and bony and gross, right? So with fertilization, it's the exact same. Plants, animals run the exact same as we do. They need frequent, normal meals that are healthy for them so that they can be healthy. So as far as fertilization, grass fertilizer is usually rich in nitrogen. So as we look at like step one bag over here, I don't know if you can see it. The number on the bag is 2338. So it's got a higher amount of nitrogen to promote a lot of green grass, because I know that all of you like your grass to grow and like to be green and like to be good. So to get the green parts to be green, we got to grow them. So we got to get them to come up. And then the second one, the phosphorus, helps with root growth. And the third one, the potassium, kind of helps with all around health of the plant, movement of water through the plant. Let's see. Grass use is a big thing to contribute when you're talking about fertilization. So if your grass is, if you're an older couple where you have a beautiful home and you have a nice lawn and your grandkids come over, once a month for Sunday dinner or every Sunday dinner, your lawn doesn't get used a ton, you don't need to fertilize a whole bunch. If you are a father of 4 children and you have a dog and they're outside all the time and your lawn gets pummeled every day, then you need to fertilize a little bit more. If you are a athletic field maintenance worker and you're taking care of the thing I can think of, I actually live up in the Logan area, and the USU soccer field up there, the girls soccer field, that thing gets pummeled, and they deep core aerate it all the time, fertilize the snot out of it, and it stays in shape decently because they're using 2 to 3 to 4 times the amount of fertilizer that you would use on your normal lawn. So if you have a high traffic area, or if you have a soccer field or something that you need to look better, you just need to fertilize it a little bit more so you can keep that growth coming. But for most of our lawns, the standard 3 to 5 pounds per 1,000 square feet. Most of our IFA fertilizer is recommended to be 5 pounds per 1,000 square feet. And I still have people that come in and say, I don't like your fertilizer. I'm like, why? Because it made my grass grow. Okay. I think that's why you put it down. And so that's just something to think about, your pounds per square feet. If it's high use, you need a little bit more. Let's see. And then if it has too much fertilizer and too much thatch, this is where I was talking about, we were going to talk about thatch again. If you have a lot of thatch, the fertilizer sits in there and can't get to the soil quite as well, then it kind of builds up and your grass will grab a hold of that fertilizer and just shoot up and kind of be bright green and grow away really fast. That is a little bit of a problem with fertilizer and too much of it and not getting through the thatch layer enough. Humate really will help a problem like that out, so you can get a lot of that stuff gone and your grass will even out. I had a problem one time that I worked on in Smithfield that was happening. I was like, what in the heck? But these people mowed their lawn like twice a week because it was just going crazy. And we started putting humate on it, and mellowed right out, took the bright spots away, thatch layer decreased, and they were in good shape after that. Let's see. And so we already talked about step one. Any step one type fertilizer that has pre-emergent, you need to put a 1/2 inch of water on there. So any of you who did that yesterday are in good shape right now, because here in Ogden, it is raining like crazy and doing really nice. And I think it's raining crazy in Cache Valley too. So hopefully you guys are getting some. Okay. If there's no questions about fertilizer, best fertilizer for new grass. I have some right here. So whether you're planting new lawn or filling in patches or whatever, putting in new sod, whatever you happen to be doing. And I haven't talked about this, so thank you, Kristen, for the question. A fertilizer that has a higher middle number, higher phosphorus, is awesome. One thing I like to do for people who are laying new sod is I like to tell them to put a fertilizer like this, or like a garden fertilizer. Like we have a fertilizer that's called 16-16-8. So it's a high 16 middle number. If you'll take that and throw it down underneath the sod and roll the sod out underneath over the top of it and put some humate on the top and water it in, you will have the best looking sod, and it will root so well, so quickly. It's amazing. It does a really, really good job. Those roots and that sod just hit right on top of that phosphorus fertilizer, soak it up, and just shoot roots into the ground. It does an awesome job. So this higher middle number helps promote a lot of root growth and development. And that's what I would put down on, sorry, I need a drink of water. That's what I would put down on new grass or new seed or under new sod. Thanks for that question. That is excellent. Put down step one last week and was dry for a week. Will it still work? Yes, it will still work. It hasn't been too hot. You may have lost a certain percentage of it to evaporation. Probably not a ton, since it was only down for a week. But a little bit you probably lost, but nothing too bad. So as long as it's getting watered in today, I think you'll be just fine. Nothing to worry about, really. Too much fertilizer. Can too much fertilizer be burn the grass? And yes, it can. So if you were to put too much salt on your food and you taste that, baby, and you're like, oh my, it feels like it's burning my tongue. Grass feels the same way. If you put too much fertilizer down, I had a professional customer, call me the other day. He's like, hey, my fertilizer spreader was acting weird today. Are you sure there's nothing else that I can do besides vacuum that fertilizer out of the ground, off the ground, to get it so it won't hurt the grass right there where I spilled? And I said, I'm sorry. I mean, vacuuming, taking your shop vac out there is the easiest thing to do, because it'll suck up all that fertilizer and then it won't burn. And he's like, okay. I'll go do it. So he had to go clean that mess up. But yes, Bev, it can burn the lawn, and it can last quite a while. You just really, if you can't vacuum it out, you just need to put a bunch of extra water there to try to flush all that nitrogen out of the way. So, okay, proper mowing practices. One biggest thing with grass is try to leave it a little bit longer because it'll retain water and you won't have to water as much. And we're going to talk about watering later, or just in a little bit. We're almost there. Never cut more than a third of your lawn off at a time. So if you go on vacation and have to come back and scalp your lawn because you were gone and nobody mowed it, the neighbor kid didn't do his job, it's best not to hack it all the way down. It's best to mow it once, leave it set for a day or two, then mow it again and get it back down to a manageable level. But if you have to do it, you have to do it. I understand. Desperate times call for desperate measures, right? Let's see. And yeah, it'll take a bit for that grass to recoup once it's been tall, because it grows differently when it's taller, and it needs to change. And so that you need to do that differently. And then always do it with a cross pattern. I know a lot of people on my block, they mow their lawn exactly the same way every single time. They mow 4 strips going towards the south, walking south. They mow those 4 strips south, and then they turn around and they mow these 4 strips, the next part of the side of their house. They always mow those north, and then that's taken care of. And then they do the same thing right across their front yard. Don't do that. Try to mix it up. Whenever I mow my lawn, I do north and south, or I guess mine's east and west. I do east and west, and then I do northeast to southwest, and do angles, and then I do the other way, southwest to northeast, and just all kinds of different stuff. So just change it around, try to do a different pattern. Your grass will love you. It's just, when your hair lays the same way for the same time, it does better and is more fuller. And if you just mix it up and make the plant move and be stimulated a little bit more. So let's see. And then one big thing that gives people a lot of dissatisfaction on their lawn is that they don't cut their lawn with a sharp blade. And if you have a blunt stick cutting your lawn, spinning around hard, it's just going to beat it to death. Yeah, it kind of cuts it, but it just beats it to death. So the whole end of that blade of grass is rattered and tattered. And so when you look over your lawn, instead of seeing some good fresh cut green grass, you just see the top of all those blades of grass, and it just kind of has a brown tint to it. That's because your blade's not sharp enough on your lawnmower. So if you'll sharpen that thing 2 or 3 times a season and keep it just really nice and sharp, it'll make your grass and your lawn look a lot better, because you're not just beating it to death. So, and then proper edging. I'm kind of an edging nerd. There is something about the string trimmer in my hand that just makes me feel good. When you do your edging, when you do along the sidewalks and stuff like that, just remember that you're exposing soil. So if you do that and do proper edging or do whatever you do, the shorter the grass is, the more soil they expose, the more you're opening up for weeds. And those weeds can be prevalent and cause problems, and it's not great. Because that's where the spurge comes in, like Bev was talking about earlier, how to get rid of the spurge. So just make sure that, if you're a good trimmer and you want to trim and have that edge look perfect, just remember that, hey, maybe it wouldn't hurt to put down another spritz of that weed killer down every once in a while, with that pre-emergent, just to make sure that those weeds don't come up along that cement edge. And then if you do, edging around trees and stuff, make sure you leave that grass just a little bit longer. Don't edge it down totally to the surface, just because that grass can't photosynthesize and can't be as healthy if it's super short right around that tree. So, all right. Now we're going to talk about irrigation system maintenance and watering of lawn, which is kind of we've got a few minutes to talk about. I don't know how long, if Dave will cut me off or not, but it looks like we've got 6 minutes. So irrigation system, you just want to make sure you're checking on it. Some of the biggest problems that I recognize with irrigation systems is people notice a dry spot, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh no, my sprinklers are broke. But when you turn your sprinklers on the spring, if you have rotating rotor heads, make sure that those heads are all moving. That's my biggest problem, is I think they put cheap sprinkler heads in my house before I bought it. And so I'll look out there and I'm like, hey, all the sprinklers are on, looks great. But then I'll get to look and I'll be like, hey, that was not going anywhere. And so if you have a dead spot show up, it's because the sprinkler is not hitting it. Another thing is that you will have a donut. You'll have a green spot right around your sprinkler head, and people will be like, well, hey, what's going on with my lawn? Why is my lawn broke? There's a problem with your sprinkler head. You've got water, your sprinkler head's leaking up underneath it, and you've got water right there around your sprinkler head, but you don't have water going everywhere else. So then you can turn on your sprinklers and adjust and see what's going on. Make sure you have head-to-head coverage, because those other sprinklers are actually in charge of watering right by that sprinkler head. So they might not be working as well as they should too. So just make sure everything's working right. Make sure that your sprinkler system puts out the same amount of water for your different sets, or else you need to be adjusting those sets, because pop-up heads will put out water faster than a rotor head. So you might run your pop-up heads for 15 to 20 minutes twice a week, but you might run your rotor heads for 45 minutes because they don't put out the same amount of water. So in cool seasons, like right now, nobody better run their sprinklers today, even if they use culinary water. But you need about an inch of water during the cool times of the year, an inch of water per week to keep your lawn healthy. If you're doing more than that, you need to cut it down a little bit. Tuna fish can out in the lawn during a set will tell you how much you're watering. So if you do a half inch twice a week, you're good. That's a half inch of water. It's going to soak down into the soil, work its way down in there and promote a lot of healthy roots. But your lawn should only be watered, at most 2 good times a week. Sometimes, the very, very heat of the year, which we probably will ask you not to do this year because of the drought, but sometimes you can bump it up to 3. But a good rule of thumb is Tuesday and Friday. Water your lawns good and heavy with a half inch to an inch of water Tuesday and Friday. And then as we get to hotter months of the year, you can bump it up to 2 inches of water. So you get an inch on Thursday, or an inch on Tuesday and an inch on Friday. But any more than that is excessive and wasting water. And if you get a more drought tolerant grass, you can use even less than that. So, and this rain is awesome because all of our water and soil and everything here is all very alkaline, but the rain is fairly acidic. It's a lot more acidic than our water is here, or a lot more closer to neutral / acidic. So this rainwater, that's why your lawn always looks better in the springtime, because the rainwater is totally different and it helps release iron out of the soil, helps change the acidity of the soil a little bit, and it just soaks in better, and it is the best. So rainwater, that's why your lawn always looks better in the springtime, is because the rain it's a different type of water and it's helping it a lot. Let's see. But one of the most important things is keeping those roots deep. So deep intermittent watering, it makes those roots chase that water down and go after it, so that you've got a good healthy lawn. You've got a decent amount of grass on top and a ton of roots on the bottom. Okay, and then as far as watering goes, you got to think about your soil type as well, because some people have a lot of clay soil, even though we've told them to amend it already. And they have a ton of clay soil that it doesn't accept water very well. It holds onto water for a long time. And so when you sprinkle a bunch of water out onto clay, it'll sit there for quite a while until it soaks in. So if you have a lawn that's really clayey, you might have to administer your half inch per week, with a couple of different sets. So you might have to run your sprinklers through 2 sets during the night or whatever to get them to get your soil to absorb all that water. And then like a sandy soil, you might water it in and it feels like the Sahara Desert in 10 minutes. And so a good dose of humate and organic matter, like we talked about, will help put more water holding capacity into your soil, even if it is pretty sandy. And that's the problem along the Wasatch Front, is like you could be in a total clay bed at the bottom of the lake, and then you can be up on a hill where the water rushed down and it's just all sand. Like it's everywhere, and it's kind of hard to follow, but there's a lot of different soil types and you can be all over the board here in Utah. And so just make sure that has enough time to soak in. That's kind of the basics, and we're to our hour mark. I could probably keep talking for another hour if anybody wants to hang around. But I'd love to have any questions that you have. Sky's the limit. I've got plenty of time. I don't know if Dave does or not, but if anybody has any further questions, I'd love to answer them. Or you can just call me at the store or come see me, because I love being down the aisle and helping people fix problems and taking care of their lawn.
Nick, if you've still got a little bit more you had in mind to cover, you can go ahead and take a little more time it's up to you. I mean, we don't have to cut off right here at 10 o'clock, or we can just answer some questions. But if you had a few more bullet points to cover, go ahead.
Okay, well, it looks like we're getting a couple more questions. I don't have a ton more bullet points, but yeah, with a few questions, I mean, I can keep going. So let's see here. When do you put on the other steps of fertilizer? So most of the time, the steps of fertilizer are put down. Usually your lawn can, like the type that's in our fertilizer, just for example, usually we recommend every 6 to 8 weeks. Some people don't like their grass to grow that much, and so they'll put on a lighter dose and only do it every 10 weeks because they don't like to mow their lawn that much, but they want it to look really nice. So usually every 6 to 8 weeks or so. So if you were to put down, let's say you put down your fertilizer yesterday, which is really close to March 15th, about another 6 weeks away would be May 1st. And then go from there. In our particular fertilizer program, we only have 4 major steps. So there is quite a gap between our June, July, August, June, July fertilizer to the fall fertilizer, which I usually recommend to try to hold out as long as you can and try to put it down at Halloween. So if you put one down on, June 15th or July 1st, all the way to Halloween, that's quite a span. That's a lot more than 8 weeks. You could put down another step. You could put down another step 3 right in the middle of there if you wanted to keep fertilizing, but usually about every 6 to 8 weeks, depending on how much your grass is growing. I've noticed that in our yard, we can, our front lawn that's totally dead. We could always tell by our front lawn that you could just tell when it just slowed. And so, I mean, if you like it to slow and it's still maintaining its green color, great, just ride it out. But if you want it to keep growing and, keep actively mowing it, if you really like your lawnmower and have a really cushy seat, then yeah, fertilize away about every 6 to 8 weeks. But you usually can't put too much on if you follow that spacing, unless you kind of have a thatch problem or you're not watering as much or something like that. So thanks for that question, Kristen. I was told in Utah that you need to apply pre-emergent again in the summer. Great question, especially if you have a lot of weed pressure. I would recommend putting a pre-emergent again in the summertime. Most pre-emergents, according to the label, will have a recommended, no more than this much per acre per year. And so as long as you're not breaking any label recommendations by applying again, you shouldn't have any problems, and you could put down as pre-emergent again, because the pre-emergent, it lasts for 2 to 3 months or so, just depending on soil type, how much you water, how much is exposed to the heat and sun and stuff like that. So if you put down a pre-emergent on March 15th and it only lasts till about May 15th or something, if it only lasts 2 months, and then your soil is finally warm enough for all your spurge and other weeds to start sprouting on May 20th, then your pre-emergent isn't going to do much. And you're going to come back to me and say, hey, Nick, your fertilizer is terrible because it doesn't stop my weeds. But if you put on a second dose, if you did a step 1 and then maybe did a step 2 and then put our step 1 on again, or another type of pre-emergent on again later in the year, it would prevent a lot of those weeds from coming up, as long as you don't miss the gap. And you can do a pre-emergent a couple of times, especially when you have a lot of seed pressure, weed pressure, your lawn's a little thin, something like that. I would highly recommend it. That's a good point, good question. Where's my contact info? Where's my store? Okay. I work at the Ogden IFA, and our address is 1069 West 12th Street. And I don't have one of my cards right here, so I can't show it to you. But yeah, so we're at the Ogden IFA, 1069 West 12th Street. And you can call us here or come see us, and we're happy to help. I know a lot of you might be down from Davis County, or a little bit low, I guess not near Davis County, but a little bit south of us. But we'd love to have you come visit us. We've got 2 or 3 or 4 real grass nerds up here, and we'll talk to you all day if you want us to. So let's see, a lot of dead areas and deciding next steps. Aerated yesterday, next seed, then humate. Yes, so if you have a lot of dead areas in your lawn and you've aerated, just make sure that those dead areas aren't caused by something like dog urine, shade, things like that. Make sure you've eliminated that problem, something that may have caused those dead areas. Sometimes, people fill up their lawnmower and spill gas all over, and that soil's not going to be very good for a while. So, but a lot of humate will help kind of get that out of there. I would highly recommend after an aeration, then you can do seed and humate at the same time, and then maybe some type of a starter fertilizer, some kind of a fertilizer, a light dose of fertilizer that has a kind of a higher middle number, so that the roots of that grass seed will take hold and do really well. Kentucky bluegrass seed, it can take sometimes, somebody said they had planted our Green Star 5. Sometimes it can take 2 or 3 weeks to germinate, and it's really kind of tedious and terrible. But when it does come up, it does a good job. A variety that has perennial ryegrass in it, the perennial ryegrass will pop up and be rolling in 7 days or less sometimes, and it does a really good job at just being quick. We've got a variety of grass seed here that's called Quick Green, and it has a decent amount of perennial rye, and it just pops up and goes quick so that people don't have to wait for results. It's like, nope, 2 or 3 days, I'm up and rolling, under less than 7 days, it's going, and you've got grass seed and you did it correctly. So I think that's a good deal. And then once your lawn that you plant in those dead spots, once you've mowed it a time or two, then you can start to spray weeds. Oh, somebody asked a question earlier about spraying weeds when their lawn was thin. Usually new grass seed, I spray weeds in it once we've mowed it a time or two. I know it's really hard to leave those weeds in there for that long, and it's really annoying, but the grass seed or the new grass plant isn't quite tough enough to handle the beating of being sprayed by a weed killer until it's just a little bit bigger and has a little bit more of a root system. Even though it's not supposed to kill that grass, it still can sometimes cause it damage if it's not taken care of very well. So, all right. Well, it doesn't look like there's any more questions. I don't have a ton more to talk about. I've stood on most of my soapboxes, so I think I'm good unless anybody else has anything else that they'd like to talk about.
And Nick, I'll mention just a couple things while everyone's still on here is, given, our interest, Nick has done a great job at talking about how to keep a lawn green. And of course, as homeowners, that adds value to, you like a green lawn. Nobody wants to just have a brown lawn. But given water situations, as a water district, we're providing water, we're trying to educate people about water and efficient water use and trying to manage that water supply. One thing to consider is lawn is pretty resilient. You can kill lawn. You can dry it up and desiccate it and kill it. But if you just have a brown spot out there, it's likely not dead. It's dormant. Stress because of lack of water has caused it to go dormant. It shuts down. It stops growing a bit. Now, extended periods of that can kill the lawn. But if it's just a little brown spot out there, you reapply water, that spot's going to green up again. So just don't panic if you have a brown spot. Do what Nick said. Look at your sprinkler system. More often than not, sprinkler systems are the issue, not a grass problem, and even not necessarily a pest problem. Sometimes people panic, like, "Oh no, what's wrong?" And you failed to turn on your system and watch it. It's watering at night. You don't see it, and so turn that on. Evaluate your sprinklers. Maybe a sprinkler head is too far apart, and so you're getting not the coverage you need, and then you don't. It dries out the fastest, it stresses the fastest in the heat of the summer. So our message is don't panic. A brown spot or two can be fixed, but it's also not the end of the world. When we're talking water supply or water situations, if you have a brown spot or two, it's going to be okay. And come fall, the cool season grasses, which Nick talked about, Kentucky bluegrass, perennial rye, those are cool season grasses. So they're gonna do a lot better in the spring and a lot better in the fall. They naturally tend to slow a little bit in the summer on their growth rate. If you fertilize a lot, you're going to keep them growing really green. But if you kind of cut back on that a little bit, it will slow that growth down, and they'll change the hue of green will change a little bit. And that's actually okay for those cool season grasses. But that's personal preference. If you're not using that lawn a lot in the summertime, let it slow down a little bit, and then it'll pick back up in the fall and it'll grow again and be happy. But those are just a few of the things we want people to understand is don't panic if you have a brown spot. It's going to be okay.
Yeah, and one thing that I like to tell people with the humate and stuff, we offer it as a free product if you buy our whole 4-step thing. But I always tell people, they're like, "Well, what I used humate for?" Because they don't have a specific need, don't know what it is. But the way I always explain it, I was like, let's say that spot in your lawn that always dries out first, that brown spot that Dave's talking about, that spot that just gets crispy first. I like to take the humate and kind of pummel it in that area and put quite a bit, because it does help retain a lot of water. And the humate is a great water retention device, and it will keep you from using not so much sprinkler water. And so it lessens the blow there. It doesn't fix the problem, because you might have a boulder under there, and that's why there's not enough water for the grass to grow. But the humate will help that soil do better and retain the water a little bit better, so that problem's not as prevalent and doesn't show up as quickly. So then it can keep your grass a little bit greener a little bit longer. How to get rid of bent grass. We don't have a ton of bent grass here. Bent grass is mostly used in golf courses. I'm guessing, I imagine you could kill it with Roundup, but I'm guessing that the bent grass you're talking about might be Bermuda grass. It's kind of a longer, stringier grass. Like you can pick it up in one side of your lawn and it's like a rope across the other side. And it's a really stringy grass, and it is a little bit of a problem here in the area for sure. It's very difficult to get rid of. You can spray it. I know people that dig it out every time they see it, and they just try to stay ahead of it, and eventually you will exhaust that root system. I know people that have sprayed their whole lawns with Roundup and tried to kill it all, and sprayed and sprayed and sprayed, just made sure it was totally dead, and then reseeded. And sometimes it still kind of comes back. I know of some people that have ripped out a foot of topsoil out of their entire yard to try to get rid of it, put new topsoil in, and kept it away for a couple of years, but then it still came back. There's a couple of different things that you can treat it with. If it's not Roundup, you can try. This is called triclopyr ester. Triclopyr is a great weed killer. It kills broadleaf weeds and types of Bermuda grasses, or Bermuda grass. And it's actually on the label right here. But if you put this with a good surfactant that helps it stick to the grassy blades, and put some of this on there, and you spray it on there whenever you see that grass is green and healthy, and give it a good healthy dose, you can take that and knock it out. And slowly knock it back. It's not going to happen in one time. It's not a cure-all. But if you're diligent, you're going to get really good control of it and do a good job. So that is one thing that you can do to help get rid of that. I would assume that it is that type of grass, and probably not bent grass. Maybe I called it the wrong thing. Is a very fine soft grass that doesn't stand up when it gets long. Oh, okay. So that might be Poa annua, I think is what it's called. It's like an annual bluegrass. And so it will that's the one that I have the most familiarity with. But that it's just a really delicate grass. And so that one, some things that you can do to help get rid of that. I know that pre-emergent works really good on some of that to try to keep it from coming back. So you could try rounding it up or doing something like that, and then putting a lot of pre-emergent right there so that it won't come back. And then hopefully the rest of your lawn will fill in that area. It's kind of hard though, because of you can't plant other grass seed too if you put pre-emergent there. So if you spray it dead and then try to get it to grow, that other seed from that grass might be there and come up as well. You could flap a piece, but you could put some pre-emergent there and flap a piece of sod over the top of it, hopefully to mat out all of those weed seeds. But that grass is kind of annoying, and sometimes it's not even rooted in very well, and you can just pull it right out. But I would recommend usually spraying it dead is the best thing. And then you can go from there with either seed or sod to try to keep it from coming back and get the other grass thicker and better in there. So
on that as well, he might be talking about fine fescue.
okay.
That could be a possibility, but the same thing applies. There's not a selective herbicide for any of those. So, you've got to just spray that area dead and reseed it, or put a new chunk of sod back over the top. On most any of those grasses, wouldn't you say, except probably annual crabgrass. There's crabgrass preventer and crabgrass control, but any of your perennial grasses, your actual lawn grasses, if you've got something mixed in there you don't like, you have to kill the whole thing and start again.
Mm-hmm. And the difference between crabgrass is, so if you see a patch of crabgrass coming up, you can go and kind of chop that out. For the most part, you'll get it because it's just kind of an annual grass. So it's pretty easy to take care of it and get it out of the way, so it's not a big nightmare mess for you. So, all right. Well, it looks like we've got her taken care of. I appreciate the opportunity, Dave. I'm grateful to be here and answer questions. Like I said, I practically live at the store all spring long. We have a nice little period called the 100 Days of Hell, and we're here the whole time, all the time. I should probably set up a cot. It'd be easier. But we're happy to answer all your questions and do everything we can to help you out. We've got a good crew here. Tina and Brenda and Fred are my biggest helpers right now over on this side of the store to answer any questions that you might have. So, but thanks very much for watching today and for all your good questions.
Thanks, Nick. There was one other thing I was going to mention, and we really appreciate Nick taking his time for you, those of you that are joining us. And if you have questions like this, IFA is a great resource. If you're too far away from that, a lot of your other nurseries are great resources for different herbicides and pesticides and different things. But one thing I wanted to mention, you had brought it up very early about buffalo grass.
Oh yeah.
Just so people kind of understand this, and you can come to our learning garden and see some patches of this, because if you're thinking of buffalo grass or dog tough grass or those warm season grasses, people use them for a lot of different reasons, but they're not a traditional lawn grass. And so some people think, oh, it's marketed, I'm going to save a lot of water, it's supposed to be this great water saving solution. They're just very different grasses. And so how they grow, how they perform, if you understand what they're going to do, fine, there's some great applications for those. But if you're thinking, oh, I'm just going to have this lawn, I don't have to water it, only every 10 days in the summer, that sounds ideal. And you get that in your yard, and it is not Kentucky bluegrass. It is not a lawn grass that you're going to be playing on a lot. You're going to be very, very disappointed and frustrated. So if you want to learn a little bit more about the warm season grasses, come out to our learning garden. We have some patches of those. You can see them. You can see what they look like now. You can see what they look like midsummer, and you can see what they look like in the fall. And right now they're straw brown. They're going to be straw brown until it warms up. And so just wanted to throw that out there for people, that there's nothing wrong with those warm season grasses, although some may be considered weeds here. So you got to be careful what you read on the internet and what's marketed out there for something that may grow in the South, or something that may even grow in St. George well, but it's not going to be suitable for the Wasatch Front. So, do a little homework on those kind of things before you do anything. Most often you're going to be using, as Nick said, Kentucky bluegrass, perennial rye, and some fescues. So yeah, thanks again, Nick. I don't see any other questions coming in. Those other attendees, that are in here, you're welcome to also call us or send us an email anytime. We'll be happy to answer any more questions, and we'll look forward to having you. Hetty Ann, do you have anything else to add?
I don't think so. It was a good class. Lots of good information.
Okay, well, thanks again, Nick. We appreciate your time on a Saturday morning, and hopefully wherever you are, you're getting rain. We need it. And yeah, I suppose even if you haven't fertilized yet with your first fertilizer, you could go see Nick right now. You might get wet applying it, but you could get it on. Oh, I wouldn't do it, but anyway, everyone has their thing.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, great. Well, thanks, Dave.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and end the class, and we'll look forward to the next one. Thanks again.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.